Welcome to your fourth lesson in Java programming, and what we're going to make in this walkthrough is a Java-based calculator. And this extends upon what we've done in the first three lessons, which was input and output to the console, running programs in the console, but now we're going to take it a step further and we're going to make a jar file. And a jar file is simply a shortened acronym for Java archive, and it's clickable. It contains all your code, so when I double click it like this, up pops your program. And additionally, what is different is this is a form-based program, similar to what we've made in other languages. And here I've got a collection of buttons. I've got a text box up here and a label up here. And by the way, I'd like you to put your own name up here just to kind of show off that you made this calculator yourself. And it can do everything a calculator can do. It can add, subtract, multiply, divide. For instance, 5 times 5 is 25. I'm going to click equals, and then I can clear it. We can do decimals, 12.5 times, let's say 7, 87.5, yada, yada. Okay, so you're going to be making that by the end of this video. And going along with that is going to be variables and arithmetic. So let's quickly review about things like naming variables. On the right hand side, I have stuff that's not acceptable. Variable names cannot start with numbers. They can't start with non-alphanumerics like the $sign or a hashtag. That's not permitted. Variable names cannot contain spaces. So over here I have variable, space, name. That's not allowed. And Java will not allow you to use any of its keywords like public, static, void, private, the ones that we've used so far in the previous programs. Those are not permitted to be used as variable names. So what is acceptable is it's very common for you to shorten up like variable to be var. So var would be an acceptable name. If you're going to combine multiple words, you should combine them like this. So var name as one word, it's all scrunched together. And if you're going to combine words, the first letter in the second through however many words that you have should be uppercase. So it starts with lowercase, but adding each word, the first letter is capitalized, and that's called camel case. In the previous video, I mentioned that the class names would be capitalized, and that was Pascal case. So if you refer to that video, I talk about it a little bit more. Another way to go about that, perhaps if you've got two letters right next to each other that happen to be capitalized, sometimes you'll see people add an underscore to separate the two. So that's another way to go about it. If you're going to add a number, sometimes it's best to put them at the end. You could put it in the middle if you wanted, or even second, but it can't be first. And then lastly, I have one that's all uppercase, and generally uppercase means that we're dealing with a constant. So if you have something all uppercase, that's what it should be. So let me move on to what a constant is. A constant is something that's not going to change its value, and there are two types of constants in a program. You've got named constants and unnamed constants. A named constant is exactly what it sounds like. Here we've given a nickname to the value 10. So anywhere I see in the program max value, it really is substituting the value 10. And min value is substituting for 1. Now, why would I want to do it this way? Well, if I had a program that had a whole lot of formulas in it, that I'm using that number throughout, anywhere that I have a number, I really should either have a constant or I should have a variable. And the reason why is because it's way easier to manipulate those once, either at the top of the code or at some point, than it is to go back through and change all the different numbers around. And it's easier to read and follow along with those formulas as well. So it's very advantageous that you make constants and make use of them, because the fewer numbers that you have in the program will make it just easier for you to maintain. So unnamed constants, we've actually used these before when we were at the beginning stages of like writing the hello world program, if we did system.out.print and in parentheses and double quotes we said hello world is actually a constant. If we're just not assigning a variable name or a name to it, I should say, like down here, like max value. Eventually, when we did write the hello world, we made a little private string variable with the name, and we assigned it hello world. But if we just threw that string inside of the print method of system.out, then that would be an unnamed constant. So I'll just type it out over here, system.out.print hello world. All right, here we're not assigning anything to it. It's just going to exist, so it's an unnamed constant. And if we were to simply print the number 100 to the console, that's another unnamed constant, because 100 is always equal to 100 and 25 is always equal to 25, and so any numeric is considered an unnamed constant as well. I'm going to go ahead and take that out. Okay, and lastly, let's talk about arithmetic operators and precedence. So this is a calculator-based application. So our operators that we're going to be using are obviously the plus, minus, multiply, divide, but you may not know modulus. Modulus means the remainder of something. So for instance, if I had that 3.5, it's the 0.5 that modulus would return. It would not care about the integer 3. So there's also the unary operators, which would make something positive or negative. You could even use an exclamation point. The exclamation point is known as the bang operator, and it inverts something. So if it's positive, then it's negative, and vice versa. Assigning values. And assigning a variable a value, you use the equal sign, but you should remember that the equal sign is really the assignment operator, and you are saying that something takes the value of. So if I were to type down at the bottom here that I have, let's say, an integer, so I'd say int temp equals 3. So here in this statement, temp is going to take the value of 3. That's what I'm saying. If I said plus equals 3, and I got to take this part out after I because here is something that's already been initialized. So above it I could say int temp, and I'm going to make it worth 10 to start. So here temp plus equals 3 is just shorthand for adding 3 to its current value. So its current value is 10, and now I'm going to say 10 plus equals 3. So it's 13 is what it would now take the value of 13. So all of these operators are combos. We can just say plus equals, minus equals, times equals, divides, and modulus equals. All of those are available to us. And it's just a shorthand way of using something. Lastly, we can also simply increment to the next value using plus plus, or decrement using minus minus, and that just takes 1 or adds 1 to the current value of a variable. For instance, if I said temp plus plus, temp would now be equal to 1 more than it previously was. Okay, lastly, precedence. So the order of operations applies to our program. So what is the precedence? Well, anything in parentheses will get figured out first. It's going to be simplified down within the parentheses, and then that result can go with everything else. Secondly is the unary operations, and this is evaluated from right to left. So that means that anything that is, for instance, negative, so if it has the negative sign in front of it, it's going to get inverted. So for instance, -3, the 3 now becomes negative. Multiplication, division, and the modulus, those are all third in precedence, and that takes place from left to right. So we're saying like 3 times 7. So we're going to actually figure that out from left to right. 3 times 7 is 21. Addition, subtraction, this is also left to right. So 3 plus 2, for instance. 3 plus 2 is 5. And then the assignment happens from right to left. So just like I did in the previous example, if I said temp equals 3 plus 2, 3 plus 2 is on the right-hand side, and it's going to get figured out first, and then temp will take the value of, because it's on the left-hand side, 3 plus 2, which is 5. So temp is going to take the value of 5. All right, so associativity, is what that means is how things are figured out. And it's either left to right or right to left, depending upon its precedence. The reason why that comes into play is, what if you had multiple operations going on, plus, minus, divide, whatever, and you had two that were the same. If you had two that were the same, well, then the associativity comes in. Okay, so let's begin building our application. We're going to be building this calculator in NetBeans. So if you want to build this at home, you can simply go to netbeans.org. It's a free download. You just click this download button, let it begin, and follow the instructions until it's installed. So again, that was netbeans.org. And this is how we're going to get started. We're going to make a Java application. So we're going to click File, New Project, and I'm going to click on this Java application, which is under Projects, and then I'm going to click Next. I'm going to give a name to this. So I'm going to call this My Calculator. And then I'm going to uncheck the Create Main method, because I'm going to do that in a few steps. So that's going to be the name of my project. I'm going to browse for a location, and I'm going to put this on my desktop. So I'm going to make a new folder, which is right here, and I can call this My Calculator. I'm going to save it within this folder and click Finish. So now it's going to make a basically an empty project for me. If I click this plus button next to my source file tree over here, it's going to open it up. So really, there's nothing in it right now. It just says, here's my source, and there's no files in it whatsoever. So with this little Java My Calculator selected, I'm going to go ahead and add that first file now. So I'm going to click File, New File, and here what I'm going to build is a form-based application. So I'm going to actually click the second one under categories called the Swing GUI Forms. And I basically need a JFrame form in the file type. So I'm going to click that, I'll click Next, and my class name here for this will be Calculator. And then I'm just going to click Finish. All right, so what I have here is a basic form. It's completely empty at this moment in time. And I'm going to just begin adding stuff to it. So the first thing I'm going to add is the label. I'm going to put the label up top. And here's where I want you to put in the label your name, but I'm just going to put example student for the time being. So with this selected over here, I'm going to go find the text property, which is sitting right there. So you might have to scroll down on your list, which is, here's the scroll bar. Here I'm going to put example student, calculator. And I'm going to make the font bigger because it's a little hard to read. So under the font, I'm going to double click that, and I'm going to make it 14. I'm going to make it bold. All right, so, And you can center that if you feel like it and all that stuff. Underneath this, I'm going to put the text box that's going to contain our output. So I'm going to go ahead and drag one of those over, and I'm going to resize. Oop, that was text area that I just grabbed. I wanted text box. So that's going to be text field. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and grab this. I'm going to make the font for this one 14 as well in bold. Everything that I'm making is going to be 14 bold. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of position that where I think it should be for now. And I'm going to make it, roughly the width of the form. And the text field, I'm going to wipe that out completely so that there's nothing in it. Because when I launch the form, I don't want it to be, I don't want any text in it whatsoever. Okay, now that I have that on the form, the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to change the name of this. So to do that, I'm going to right click and click change variable name. And I'm going to call it my output TB for text box. So I just hit enter there to accept the changes. And now I'm going to add 2 panels. So I'm going to add one panel over here, and this is going to contain most of my buttons. And the reason why is because once I get all my buttons in this panel, it's easier to reposition them as a group. If I wanted to add more buttons, perhaps I wanted to add something that would allow me to make my numbers positive and negative. That might be a good addition to this calculator. So I could move all of my buttons as a group. Okay, and then I'm going to put another panel right next to it for my operators. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of make it about that big. All right, now I can go ahead and add buttons to it. So I'm going to go ahead and put these buttons inside of the panel. I'm going to make the first one as a template, and then the rest of them are going to go ahead and take that value. So I'm going to go ahead and make the text of this first one. I'm going to do it just like the layout of a keyboard. So this is going to be the 7 button. So I'm going to put 7 in the text. I'm going to make the font size 14, and I'm going to make it bold as well. I'm going to scroll all the way down to the bottom, and I'm going to make the horizontal size 45 so that they're all the same width. And that's going to make them a little bit wider than the default size because the clear button is going to be 2 characters. Now they're all going to have the same width, so it'll look nice. All right, now with this selected, I'm going to right click and click duplicate. And I'm going to do it again until I have a bunch of buttons. All right, so I have a bunch of 7s here, but I'm going to basically change them to something else. So with this second one selected, I'm going to make that one my 4. Oop, I just clicked on I meant to click text. Okay, so I need to scroll back up to text and change this to 4. I have the wrong one selected. So this one's going to be 4, and this one's going to be 1, and this one's going to be the period, or the decimal. All right, so with all of those, I'm going to go ahead and select all of these, and I'm going to go ahead and duplicate those as well. So I'm going to go ahead and put a stack right next to that one, and then I'm going to duplicate those as well. I'm going to reposition these so that I have basically 3 columns. I just need to change the name of them and the value. So here I'm going to make the text of that one 8, and this one 9. This one's going to be 5, 6. This one's 2. This one is 0. Oh, that one's 3. I got ahead of myself. 3. The middle one I'm going to make into 0. And this bottom right one is going to be the clear button. So I'm going to do an uppercase C and a lowercase l for clear. Okay, now that expanded on me, so I'm going to tighten that up by just dragging it up like that. and I'm going to now click over in the other panel. I'm going to go ahead and add the other buttons for add, subtract, multiply, and the equals operator. So I'm going to go ahead and I should probably grab one of these real quick, and I'm going to duplicate the 9 real quick just to slide it over, and that way I don't have to do a whole bunch of settings. So now I guess I'm going to have to take this grouping. Now if I hold down the control button, I can click all of these buttons and select them. I'm going to drag it up. Reposition that as well. Okay, so this one, I'm going to make this one into the plus button. So now with that selected, I'm going to duplicate this one as well. Just a couple more times. All right, so this last one is going to be the equal. Let's see, this one right here is going to be the subtract. And this one is going to be multiply. Now the multiply is the asterisk, which is the shift 8 on the keyboard. And this one is going to be divide, which is the /. Okay, that should be all of the operators. So let me go ahead and make this a little bit smaller. And I'm going to make the output match that. All right, so that looks a little bit better. All right, now I need to go through and rename all of these. They all need to take on a different name, and we're going to keep the names similar to one another. So I'm going to start here with 7, and we made that one first, so that's where I'm going to start. So I'm going to call this one 7 BTN. The B is capitalized, and I pointed that out earlier. That's called camel case. So I'm going to again click on this. This is the 8 button. Change the variable name to 8 BTN, and I'm going to just continue on with this format. This is the 9 button, so 9 BTN. And again, I can't put numbers first, so that's why I'm spelling these out. So this is 4 BTN. This is going to be 5 BTN. 6 BTN. 1 BTN. 2 BTN. 3 BTN. Now, when it comes to this one, I'm going to call this one decimal BTN. This one will be 0 BTN. And this one is clear BTN. All right, up here, this one's going to be add BTN. This one is going to be subtract BTN. This one is going to be multiply BTN. This one will be divide. And this one is going to be equals. Okay, so now that we have all the buttons made, now we can handle the events that are going to take place in this form. So just like we did in some other languages like C#, we've got event handlers for these buttons. So if I simply double click, by the way, I want to show you this panel. This panel now moves the buttons as a group. So if we do end up adding more buttons like unary buttons that would allow for positive and negative, that kind of stuff, now we can move these around as a group. We could turn this into a scientific calculator if we wanted. I'm going to go ahead and click in order 0 through 9. So I'm going to double click 0, and here it's going to add to our code. So let me just quickly scroll up here and show you all the code that Java made for you. So while we were adding buttons to the form and stuff, it was adding the code that actually goes along with all of it. So now we added the click event for the 0 button. So anything we put between 237 and 239 here is what will happen when somebody clicks the 0 button. So let me go back to design view. Here's design view. Here's our source view. I'm going to click design view, and I'm just going to keep going. I'm going to double click 1, go back to design, click 2, go back to design, double click 3, go back to design, double click 4, and I'm just going to repeat this until I get all the buttons. And I'm going in order just because it keeps the code in order. All right, now that I have 9, I'm going to go ahead and add the decimal, and I'm going to add the clear button. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to click all of these events as well. So the add button, the subtract, the multiply, the divide, and the equals button. All right, so these are all the methods that we're about to develop one by one. All right, so the first thing that we can do is we're going to add a method because all the numbers are going to be the same. So if we create a method that is going to handle the number input, a couple of things that we want to be able to check for is, do we want to use this number as the first number, or do we want to add it onto numbers that are already in the box? So if we just go ahead and put numbers in the box, I'll show you what I'm talking about. So let's only do something with the 0 button right now. So right now I'm going to say the output text box, so that was output capital T lowercase b, that's just basically output text box, dot set text, and anything I put in here is going to be what's going to go into that box. So what I want to do here is I just want to say 0 button dot get text. So that's the text of the 0 button. Of course, I could have just put a 0 in here, but this again makes the code more maintainable. So I'm going to go ahead and click the play button, and it's going to say my project calculator does not have a main class set, so select the main class, and I'm going to select calculator, and now my program runs. So I'm going to go ahead and click 0, and it's just going to add 0 one time. I can keep clicking it, and it does nothing. So here what we can do is we can actually add to this. We can say it's going to be the output again, output text box dot get text, like this, plus the 0 button dot get text. So now if we did this, we're going to do what's called concatenating two text strings. We're basically merging them together. We're appending onto what's already there. So I'm going to go ahead and hit play. So I hit 0, and I can add a whole bunch of zeros, but it's still not what we're going to want, especially if we already click equals. If we click equals, there's going to be a number sitting here, and if we click again, we don't want to add to that number. We want to start over again. So that's the effect that we want to be able to manipulate. So in order to do that, let's wipe this out. We're going to make a method that will handle all of the number buttons. So let me go ahead and I'm going to scroll down to the end of my list here, where right after I'm the equals button method, I'm going to begin writing some custom methods. So I'm going to be on line 384. I'm going to give myself some space, and I'm going to call this number click. So it's going to be private to this class, so it's only accessible by the calculator class, and it's going to be a void. That means it's not returning any value. It's just going to be performing an action. And I'm going to call the method number click because that's what it does. It handles the click event of numbers. And I'm going to be able to pass it an integer that I'm going to call num. So every time we click one of those buttons, I'm just going to pass it the number that got clicked, and then it's going to check to see if a certain case is true, which I haven't made yet. So I'm going to go ahead and just set this up. Well, I'll go ahead and type this in now. It's called is next calculation. So this is an if statement. This is a decision structure. We did this in our Hello World program because it's not new to us. You've made these before. So I'm going to scroll to the top, and right above where you see public calculator, that's called the constructor method, I'm going to make a bunch of variables that are going to add up to this. So the first thing is, and by the way, these are called fields. I've mentioned that in the previous videos. So these are variables that will apply to the calculator class. So private double, so that means a number that happens to have a decimal point. And the first one is going to be total 1. And I'm going to set it to 0.0 at the start. And obviously that can change. I'm going to make another double variable called total 2, and that's going to be equal to 0.0. And I'm also going to make a third variable that's a character. So char, or car is how some people call it, is the name of this variable, and we're going to call it math operator. And that's going to hold the value of whatever button that we click, like plus, minus, multiply, or divide. So we'll know what operation that we're doing. And then I'm going to add a Boolean value, and that's the one that I was just about to make, called is next calculation. And it's going to be false. So that means that if we've clicked the equals button, we don't want to add numbers onto that like I demonstrated before. We want to start a whole new calculation over. So I'm going to double click this so I can copy it. So I just hit Control C, scroll back to where I came from. Oh, and it is spelled correctly. So if you didn't spell it correctly, you can just paste it right in there, which is what I intended on doing, but I spelled it right. All right, so now what we're going to do is, if that is true, if our is next calculation is true, then we're going to actually wipe out the text box. So we're going to say output.setText. So this is what changes that. We're going to wipe it out. We're going to make it basically nothing. So that's 2 empty quotes, 2 double quotes right next to each other with no space. And we're going to set is next calculation to false again. So as long as that's false, it's going to skip that decision. But if it ever was true, we need to reset the box. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a temporary string that is going to equal the output that is being displayed plus whatever num, which is the parameter that we're passing to number click. All right, so if num click receives a number, which is it's going to get here in a minute, then we're going to append that onto the temporary string. And then we're going to output it back to the text box. Okay, so now I can take this method that I just made called number click and substitute it in anytime that I click one of those number buttons. So by just calling number click, it's going to run all of this code every time. And I've made this generic enough that it can apply to any button. So let me go ahead and scroll on up to the 0 button, action performed method. And I'm going to go ahead and paste in the name of that method, but I've also promised that I would be sending it an integer. So I'm going to, in between these set of parentheses, I'm going to pass a parameter that is an integer. It's a round number every time. But that means that I'm going to have to convert text into a number. So to do that, I have to use what's called a helper method, and it's simply called integer. So that's a helper method. It converts stuff. So integer dot parse int, and I'm going to autocomplete that just by pushing enter, and I'm going to pass it 0 button dot get text, and I'm going to again autocomplete by pushing enter, and then I have to put a semicolon at the end of the line. Okay, so let me just test this out by pushing play right now, and I should get the calculator to pop up, and I'm going to click 0, and I get a whole bunch of zeros. So it's working great. All right, now I can take that same method and copy it to the other buttons, but when I do this, I'm going to change each time 0 button to whatever this is. So this is the 1 button, so I'm going to go ahead and change this to 1. And I'm going to go ahead and continue. I'm going to go to the next one, and I'm going to change this one to 2. You can see why I did this in number order. It's a little easier to follow along with. So now this one is 3, and the next one is going to be 4. This one is 5, and 6, there's 7, 8, 9. All right, now I'm at the decimal and the clear button. So before I do that, I'm going to test all of the numbers really quick, just to make sure that I'm working the way that I think I am. So I'm going to go ahead and click play. Oops, and I shrunk the form down a little bit. I'm just going to click all the buttons. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So yes, all the numbers are working just the way that we intend them to work. All right, so now we have to figure out how do we want the decimal button to work. So let's go ahead and just put in what we think we should put in, and then I'll show you the problem with it. So here's what we're going to have. Let's just make string temp equal to the output text box dot get text plus the decimal button dot get text. And then we're going to go ahead and output set text to what temp is. Okay. So let's show you what happens when we do this. So let's just say I have 5 and I push decimal. Well, that puts the decimal point at the end, but what if we did that again? So I'm going to go 5.2 and I hit decimal. It keeps adding decimals, and of course we can't do this. So we're going to have to check, we're going to have a decision on whether or not we can add this or not. So I'm just going to add a space above string and add an if decision structure to this. And I'm just going to look inside output text box. So I'm going to say output text box.get text. So this is going to return the text that I have. And when I get that, I'm going to do something called dot index of, and I'm going to look for that period. So in between double quotes here, it's going to find where in the text the period is, and it's going to be a number from 0 to however long the text box goes. So it's never going to be -1 unless it's not found. So that, which is exactly what I'm going to check for. So if it is equal to -1, which means it's not there, then we can add it. Otherwise, we won't. And it looks like I misspelled output, so I'm going to add the T to that. So, all right, so now this is only going to add a decimal if there is no decimal. All right, I'm going to go ahead and test that out. So I'm going to push play, and I'm going to say 6.2, and then hit another decimal. See, it won't add another decimal now. So if I wanted to do that again, I would have to clear it out, which is the next method to make. All right, so the clear method is going to be pretty easy to make. It really needs to do one thing, and that is clear out the output text box, but it's also going to reset our total. All right, so we're going to say output text box, and we're going to set the text to just these empty quotes. And then we're also going to, while we're here, set total 1 to 0.0. Alright, so total 1 is now reset and the output text box is reset. So let's go ahead and test that as well. So let's just enter in some random numbers and hit clear, and it just cleared it. Great. Okay, so the next thing to do is handle all of the operator buttons. So if we click add, subtract, multiply, divide, we need to have the calculator reset, but remember which one was clicked. So let me demonstrate real quick that let's say we have a number like 78 and we click plus. Right now 78 is still in the box, so we would want 78 to go away like this, but remember that for later. We want to store 78 as our first total, and then whatever we do next, we're going to be adding to it. So to do that, we have to do those steps in code. So on line 372, I'm going to go ahead and add some more space. I'm going to start another method called private void, and the method name is going to be called getOperator. And we need to send this method whatever button operator was clicked. If it was the plus button, we need to say it was plus. If it was minus, we need to say it was minus. So to do that, we have to keep it generic and say that we're going to send it a string, and we'll just call that string button text, because that'll be easy for us to pass. Alright, so then we're going to put some curly braces up, and now we can go ahead and do those 3 steps. So the first thing is, let's set the math operator first. So we're going to say math operator now is going to take the value of the button text that we just sent it, and that is a string, so it could be multiple characters, but we always just want the first one, because really we happen to know as the programmer that we're only sending it one character, but the computer doesn't know that. So we're going to use the method .car at position 0. 0 in computer speak is the first position. It's the first character that we send it. Alright, so the math operator can now take whatever we send it, whether it's plus, minus, multiply, or divide, and now we can work with it. So we're going to say total 1 is now going to take the value of whatever total 1 happened to be at the moment, plus the double value, or I'm sorry, this is the double helper method, and we're going to go ahead and parse the double of whatever happens to be in output text box .get text. And then lastly, we wanted to wipe out what was in the text box so we can put in our next number. So I'm going to say output .textbox.set text and blank it out by having 2 double quotes next to one another. Alright, so let's go ahead and test it. Oh, we haven't used this method yet, so let's put this into action somewhere. And I guess to do that, let's use the add button. So I'm going to wipe out this text. By the way, the to-do comments are put in there automatically by the IDE. So we can just, they're comments, we can wipe them out. Okay, so we're going to add the add method. We're going to say string, and we're going to call that string temp for temporary. And it's going to be the add button, get text. And then we're going to say get operator. So it's going to run that method, and we're going to send it temp, which happens to be the text that's in the add button, which is only a plus sign. All right, so let's go ahead and test it out. We'll hit play. Say 85 plus. All right, so now it just wiped it out, and it saved our total right now. All right, this is as far as we've gotten. So right now we have to basically do the same thing in the subtract, multiply, and divide method. So I'm going to basically just copy this to the other three. So there's for subtract, multiply, and divide. But I need to change the button to match. So this is now the subtract button, and this is the multiply button, and this is the divide button. Okay, so let's test those other three to make sure that they do the same thing. So I'm going to just click a button and then test them each. And they work. Okay, so now we can set what the equals method is going to be. So the equals method now, let me wipe out the to-do comment, is going to put together everything that we've done so far. So to do that, we're going to have to switch off of the math operator that was used. So we're going to make a switch statement. And it just needs to math operator. All right, so depending upon which operator got clicked, we need to make a case for each one. So here is a single quote, and characters have to be in single quotes. So I'm going to say plus and then a colon. On the next line, I'm going to say total 2 equals total 1 plus that double helper method, parse double. And we're going to try to parse what's in the text box. And then we're going to say break. All right, I'm going to take this and I'm going to copy this 3 more times and then just change what the case statement does. I'm going to ignore these errors for the time being because I know they're duplicates. So this one's going to be a minus. This one is going to be multiply. And this one's going to be divide. And I also need to change this to match, this to match, and this to match. All right, after the switch statement, I'm going to set up an if statement to round the number if it happens to be, if it ends in 0. If it has 0 remainder, then we don't need to show the remainder. So to do that, I'm going to take total 2 and subtract it from the integer equivalent of itself. So if it's 3.5 and I converted that to an integer, it's going to just be a 3 now. It just basically drops anything at the decimal point. Even if it was like 0.9, it would not round it at all. It's just going to drop the decimal. And that would leave me something that's greater than 0. So I'm going to say if it is 0, then that's what I'm going to output. And actually I'm going to set some curly braces just to keep it consistent. So output text box set text is going to be equal to, and I'm going to now use the integer helper class, toString equivalent of int total 2. That's called casting, by the way. So I'm casting a something that was originally a double into an integer, which could potentially lose data, but we know that it's not. So output textbox.setText. We're going to use that double helper method again, toString, and this time we can just say total 2. All right, now since we've gotten to the end of the equals method, we can say is next calculation is now true. All right, so if we've reached this point, we would want any click of a button that is next to wipe out what's in the output text box and start a new calculation entirely. And to do that, we also need to set total 1 to equal 0. All right, I'm going to go ahead and save that and then go ahead and run it. All right, so now I'm going to say 7 times 7 to test it, and I get 49. I'm going to say 8 divided by 4 equals 2. And again, when I click equals, now I'm going to start a new calculation. So 4 plus 6, that equals 10. And now I need to test the subtract button. So I'm going to do 12 minus 5, and that equals 7. Just to test the decimal point, I'm going to say, because remember, we're going to make this round. So I'm going to multiply this times, let's say, I need to have it, well, times 2 would be 25. So times 2, 25. So it dropped the 0. That's good, because that's what we're doing down here. But let's say we divide this by 2. I should get a decimal. All right, great. So lastly, how do we make the clickable, runnable jar that we had at the beginning? So this was my program executable. That's pretty easy. We're just going to go to the Run menu up here and click Clean and Build My Project. So what that just did was it built the jar file. So it says building jar file, and it tells you exactly where it put it. Here it put it in my it's in my calculator, which is on my desktop under the dist folder. So I'm going to shrink all that down. I'm going to go into my folder that I made earlier, double click this, there's that dist folder, and here's the jar. So if I double click it, this is the running program. And if you made this at school, you may want to just take that jar file and try it on your home computer. You'll see that as long as you're running Java, this program is very portable. You can take it with you. So it's a pretty cool thing to do. So now that you have that, what you're going to turn in is the Java class file that you just made. So if you go under the source folder, src, you just made this calculator app. If you were following along, you can go ahead and turn this in, as well as the jar executable that you would have built here at the end as well. And I should be able to launch this, and once again, you would be substituting your name up here so we can see your calculator that you got to build. Okay, hopefully that was successful for you, and if you have any questions, go ahead and see me in class.